This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Tamara Laine on the show. She is the founder, CEO of MPWR, and an Emmy Award-winning journalist, which we're going to talk about too as well. So with all that being said, Tamara, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
So one thing I failed to mention is you also host a podcast called What the Frac, which I'm sure we'll get into today anyway. But if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of what your journey's been like to get to where you are today.
Yeah, so I love my background. It's and I say that only because it took me a long time to figure out really what my specialty was. And what I learned is by having a nonlinear background and really robust experience that, that expertise is totally different than, staying in one lane for most of your career. Mm-hmm. Both are good and both give different experiences. So with that said, my long intro into it, my background, which is, nonlinear, I started out in the arts. So I was a documentary filmmaker, and then I became an investigative news journalist for about 15 years. I helped launch 3 media outlets. And, was really heavy into news, research, writing, and technology and impact investing. And so after spending obviously over a decade in journalism and media, I decided that I wanted to work with startups. I wanted to help startups tell their stories. And that led me to learn marketing, right? School of Hard Knocks, learning marketing. And then I helped launch a live selling shopping platform with a couple of other founders. We had a great time. We scaled up $7 million in the first of ARR the first year and kept that going, and then left that and did some fractional consulting. That's where the name What the Frac comes from in our podcast. And then you find me now, which is launching my own AI fintech company.
So tell me about how you go from, how you get into fintech, launching an AI fintech company, and what about AI has kind of intrigued you into doing that? Because what is the exciting part about that? Because it's got to be something exciting for you.
Yeah, well, so I should say, this journey actually started over 8 years ago. So when I was doing investigative journalism, I was doing a lot of technology research, and actually where I won my Emmy was a news investigation that I did into ethical AI, into a group of activist shareholders who were fighting for a code of ethics in AI implementation at Amazon and Northrop Grumman. And so I was talking with all these leaders in AI, all these ethicists. I was, I was going from group to group and just kind of embedding myself. And so that's when I really got interested in AI, and it was early on in kind of the AI development. And I'd been following, different technologies. Like I was interviewing Bitcoin traders back in 2012 when they were trading Bitcoin in Whole Foods cafeteria in New York, right? So I'd been kind of on the frontiers of technology and reporting for a long time. And so then when I stepped out and I started building technologies as a co-founder, that's where I really started to kind of figure out how do we implement AI into our technology in an ethical way and in a way that scales, that's, doing good, not doing any harm, because AI is, powerful and can be, it's a very powerful tool. And so way. And so where the fintech comes in is, I have been on advisory boards for financial fluency for women. for years. And so, and I had worked on products for technical assistance for banks, and it really started to come together when I saw just this critical problem of access to capital for thin-filed users. And so, and that's really anyone who doesn't have a W-2 or kind of consistent work history, is, one of the main things there. And so I started to see this gap and how we could improve it. And the second that I saw how AI could really transform that, especially agentic AI, I started looking for a co-founder, and we started to come up with the idea of how we can create a solution. So that's the journey there.
So, well, I want to get into that solution, in just a little bit, but let's back up just a little bit. We're talk about ethics, and you mentioned crypto at the beginning, and there's always like a ethical discussion around crypto and NFTs, and then now with AI, it seems to be like there's a new story about people's misuse, I guess, of AI when it comes to deep fakes or copyright material and things like that, and how that's going. How far does this ethics question go when it comes to AI?
Well, where I really focus my time and energy, especially as a founder, is how do I, as a founder, set the foundations to create, um, you know, a how to make my AI ethical, right? And so, we say create ethical AI. That's kind of weird because it's the human who is actually formulating the codes, right? And the system.
Exactly.
And so when you take a step back as a leader, you need to start putting into place really practical things that help you think through what you're creating and why, and how you're creating it. And so there's really simple steps that you can take that start that process, right? I'm not saying, right now where we're at, there is no go-to on how to do this. Everyone is bumping their head along the way, trying to make sure that they're working at the best of their capacity and with their values in mind, or at least I hope they are. I'm gonna throw that out there and say I hope people are doing that. So what we do is we start with a code of ethics, where my co-founder and we sat down and we said, what is it that we need to have in place as we build our AI, right? And so we have our code of ethics. Then you have to look at who's creating it, right? And AI is a product of who creates it. And this is when I was doing the investigative journalism, the big problem was AI was all being created by one demographic of people.
Yeah.
And that causes really severe implications when you look at how the products then behave afterwards, right? We see the things about, technology that scans facial recognition and cannot spot people of diverse backgrounds, can mislabel them, can identify them poorly, and then cause situations where, they are identified by the police and it's the wrong person. There's so many harms when we create from a place of oneness versus diversity. And so that's the second thing. When you start creating your AI, you have to say, who's building this, and what are the implications of not having diversity, and how do we build that in? And it has to be diversity of everything that you can think of: thought, of gender, of demographics, of education, really start to build that in. And as lean startups, it's hard to do. Mm-hmm. But if you're at least giving it thought, you're a step ahead. And then it comes into the practice of checkups, right? So you have to plan your checkups as you're building it out. You put it into your roadmap. Like, it's a discussion that you should be having in your roadmap of, are we sticking back to our code of ethics and to basically the values that we have? If you're bigger, you should have a board that's looking at this, or an advisory board that comes in that's independent. And then, you can take steps from there. But those are the minimum things, if you're developing AI, that you should have in place.
Yeah. So can you use, when it comes to that diversity that you're talking about, and, being a lean startup, being a startup of any kind, a lot of times it's a single founder or a couple of co-founders, and it's hard to have that deep, diverse background as you're building it. Can you use AI to kind of help assist with that?
I mean, you can. There's all sorts of like synthetic, you can create your synthetic audiences, you can create your synthetic advisors. But I don't think just because you're a lean startup does not mean you can't have a diverse board of advisors,
True. So,
right?
yeah. And how do you go about that? Because you mentioned like demographics. I'm not just thinking about like, race, but also age and economic backgrounds and things like that. Sometimes it's very difficult to get a board of advisors with, that come from, um, a poor background, or something like that. So how do you go about putting that team together?
It just takes a lot of thought. And I would say right now, like mine is not perfect, right? Like I'm looking for people who are younger to be on my board right now.
Oh, that's a good one.
Uh,
Yeah. Because it's hard to find young people that are on boards, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
Exactly. So when I look at my board of advisors right now, um, there is diversity in it, but there's not diversity. There's diversity at age where we have some people who are more executive in their careers, but it kind of stops at the 40s, right? And I need to go and I need to get some younger people to be on and to be, um, advising me and bring them into the equation here. So I where I say, like, I don't point the finger and say someone's not perfect, but if they're not trying, then there's a flaw there.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Um, when you talk about being intentional and not just about who makes it, but when I think about ethics when it comes to AI, you mentioned it is the user typically that he's kind of the unethical one, asking the let's say ChatGPT, for example, asking it questions to get an answer that you shouldn't maybe provide. What kind of guardrails can you put around your development process to make sure that those malicious activities aren't being done?
Well, I mean, especially if you're creating agents, you do need to put those guardrails in. My chief technology officer is probably the person who's like can dig in more on the guardrails and how we put them in. But you have your frameworks. You make sure that in your model you can't do any of the red flag issues, right? Because not only safety, but in where I'm at, there's regulatory concerns. So we're building in all of our regulatory frameworks into our AI model.
Mhm.
Um, but there's companies too. So I was just in SF Tech Week. And so I was talking with companies who you can hire and come in and troll your AI, right? So that you make sure that your system can't be broken or that what you set up in your framework doesn't come out, right? Because you can set it up and it can be a little bit flimsy, right? You can say, "Oh, we don't want it to I'm just gonna use swear," right?
Yeah.
Or as an example. But you send I'm going to say a troll on that for, 2 days nonstop and millions of attacks potentially you could change something. So there are companies that do that specifically for AI companies that you hire them, they come in, they see if, your AI agent is up to the standards that you created.
Hmm. So when you switched over from journalism to co-founding, what was the biggest change that you had to do with your mindset to switch gears?
Oh gosh. I mean, I feel like there's been so many mindset shifts.
Yeah.
Um I you know, I'm trying to think of any that I'm dealing with right now. Um I would say one of the biggest mindset shifts was okay. I, as a journalist, everything was fair and balanced, right? I went out of my way to get both sides. And what I always tried to do was let the user, or I mean, I say the user now just because I'm so used to that, um, the viewer, right? Because that my audience was my viewer. I wanted to make sure that the viewer had all the information they needed to make an informed decision. And that was my job. My job wasn't to sell them anything other than the problem. And here are people working on different points of view and solutions. Then, as a founder, as someone working on products, I had to totally shift. My job is to make sure that people want to work with me, buy my product, be a part of the community. I am, selling. And selling was a huge mindset shift for me because I liked, in my head, it's like, oh, it's a perfect world. I created something fantastic. People are going to want, I'm just going to present the facts. And the fact, and that's not how consumers behave. Consumers are emotional. They behave off of emotion. And so me bumping, my way through figuring that out and how to go from someone who's like, no, I give the facts and people decide rationally to know you give the facts, but also the emotion behind it. And your job as a founder is to sell.
Yeah, it reminds me of, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I remember one of the first leadership books I ever read was, Start With Why, Simon Sinek. And he talks about how, like, you can't just give the facts. You have to talk about the why behind it. Make people feel something because they're going to remember what they feel more than they remember what you said. And
Yeah.
so that's definitely a huge shift because you think about journalism and, the fact that, in media, you want to present everything and let the, as you called him, user, make the decision, right? And let them make up their own mind. You don't want to influence them one way or the other. You want to just put what's out there, the truth,
Yeah.
But in business, you want to influence them to spend money. So that it is a little bit different there.
Yeah, 100%. And that, I would say that's probably still something that I struggle with just because it's so ingrained in my nature.
How much of that, when it comes to leadership development, how much of influence and, explaining the why and getting people's emotions involved is a trait of good leadership?
Oh, I think it's the number one thing in leadership, right? It's the fundamental part of being a leader, especially in startups. Because your job is to, if you are someone who found a solution to a problem, your job is to get people to rally behind that and to help build it for you until you can start to scale. And it's almost an irrationality, right? Like that you have to believe and lead. And so if you don't have that, it's probably your number one liability.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I was actually having a conversation with my wife about leadership in general, and we were talking about like how good leaders can, they can present the facts, even if it's doom and gloom, but do it in a way that inspires people to fix the problem, not without yelling at them, without belittling them, without putting them down, but giving them the why behind it and inspiring them to move forward. And as you've shifted from journalism, where you went into just presenting the facts, not trying to necessarily push somebody in a direction or the other direction, how have you had to change in order to get to that inspirational leader that you are today?
I think I'm lucky. So when I was a journalist, I was on TV. So I had to work on the skills of presenting and, those, after working on it for long enough, becoming someone who could stand in front of a crowd and deliver a speech or get on a Zoom and, rally the troops became easier. I don't think that it's something that people are naturally gifted with. I mean, there's a few people who are, but it's a skill. You work on it, you get better at it. And I feel like that I was very lucky to have had coming from journalism. Then as I became a founder, you learn that yes, you have to be inspirational, but you have to be able to back it up. And you have to be able to, you can't sell, I was going to say snake oil, but people can sell snake oil. When you're rallying people to believe in you, you should have a good product and
Yes.
a good idea. And so your foundation has to be grounded in something that's very good and people can see and think that they believe in it as well. Then your job is easy to make them join you and, work long hours and do all the things that startups need to do. So as a leader, those things, I think, how do I put this? when you're rallying people, product first, then vision, because it's going to be much easier to get them to fall in behind you. But I think what I was going at is I was going to answer your question about leadership and journey. This is the first year that I've started to work with executive coaches. And I found that that was one of the most critical things missing from my leadership journey. So, I've been in an executive position for over a decade, right? Then leading startups, and then, leading big teams to growth, and then fractional leadership. Um, I wish I would have had an executive coach a long time ago, because the things that I've learned to become an even better leader have transformed the way that I'm working now. So one of the things you say about, being a visionary leader and rallying the troops, one of the executive coaches that I worked with, I did, this whole long sheet, filled it out, sat back down with her, met with her, and she said, one of my biggest areas of growth for me as a visionary and being able to rally people behind me is I lead by convincing people, not by empathizing. And so what's interesting about that is, and it makes sense as a news reporter or someone who's debates, I can get people and haggle them in and be like, follow me and do this great thing. But by lacking the empathy, it takes a lot more effort for me to do that than if I was able to meet people where they're at and figure out what draws them into it versus what draws them into me. So as a leader, if you can look at someone and say, well, what makes you really excited to be a part of this? Not being a part of what I'm doing, not joining me in this rally, but joining because this makes an impact on your life. You're going to have much longer sustained results in rallying people to your cause.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think empathy is one of the things we've talked about a lot on the show that a lot of leaders struggle with, and I think part of that is because in order to get to a point where you're leading people, you had to have a little bit of, more, I don't want to say selfish, but I guess it's more, that kind of self-fulfilling, ambition to drive forward and, make sure that you are taking care of yourself first. But then you get into a point where you're managing people and the whole thing has to shift. You're no longer an individual contributor. You're now a team leader. And in order to lead a team, you've got to empathize. And, I've struggled with that. And I've had people, I had a mentor when I was first becoming a manager that kind of pointed out that the reason why people are quitting your team isn't for more money. It's because of the boss, And yeah, sometimes it's hard things to hear, but you've got to learn to empathize with people. And I know for me, it has to be very intentional, and I have to set aside time to do it. Otherwise, I just don't do it. My ADHD just doesn't allow me. I just jump to the next thing, and I don't spend the time to think before this one-on-one, what is, this person going through? What is their ride to work like? What projects are they working on that are struggling? And to think through how they may respond to the questions that I'm going to ask instead of just asking them. Yeah.
It's really hard. And empathy is probably the hardest thing to do as a leader because it takes time, and time is your most valuable resource. Right? Yeah. And so figuring out, I think one of the number one things is making sure that your direct reports, right, that you have the right amount, that your team organization chart is fine-tuned, because if you only have so much time and you only have so much energy, that's going to be your biggest time suck.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to a person not so long ago. We're talking about org charts, and they mentioned that there's a leader at a company that he helps coach for that has 22 direct reports, and he's a CEO. I was like, how can you can't manage 22 people? You just truly cannot do it.
No, because I think that's even a half an hour meeting. One-on-one, because you should have a one-on-one meeting with your direct reports once a week or a week or so a week. That's
half of your time just doing one-on-ones. It's I mean, I know they say Dunbar's number is 150. I can't manage 21 people's workloads and understand it. There's no way. I think 5 is about my max mentally that I can handle. Some people can do more, but 5, maybe 6, and then I run out of bandwidth.
Well, and I think it depends on the stage of your company, right? smaller companies, the founder is wearing a lot of hats. Most of their time is going to be spent doing sales. You can't spend that much time internally doing, one-on-ones, truly caring for the people that you should be supporting. So that's why you have to have the structure in place for them to do that, because you pick your time on what's going to bring back the most return, money, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's where you do a deep dive in your calendar and you start
cutting things out.
Yeah.
Other than empathy, what is another big surprise that you learned through this executive coach?
Gosh, empathy was the big one where I was like, oh, that's going to be the hardest one to do for me. I'm trying to think of more that she mentioned to me.
I know for me, it was taking a step back. It was like not being involved as much and giving more trust. Like I guess I had trust issues without knowing it, and where I wanted to have everything ran by me. I wanted to, and I used the excuse of I just don't want to be blindsided. But in reality, it was I had a trust issue. Like I wanted to, to have my fingerprints on it.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I'm the opposite. I like to be hands off and not micromanage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to say that you're micromanaging, but like my style.
Oh, I was 100%.
Oh.
I don't anymore. I have fixed that problem and I'm good with it and I'm happy to not do it. But I was for sure.
Yeah, I have to lean in more because I'm much more hands off. I'm much more, all right, you've got your tasks, now get them done and bring them back to me. And like they need to be at a certain caliber and level. And so I had been a mentor a lot to young women, and then I think, just some of those things slipped. And so I have to bring in more of that mentorship skills into working with my team.
Yeah, absolutely. So what advantages did you have or did you get that has helped you in your career from being a mentor? Because I think that's one of the things that we don't have enough mentors out there personally. And whenever you mentor, you learn as much as a mentor, I think, as the mentee learns many times. So what have you learned and been able to bring into your business life?
Gosh, well, first, I just like to say I didn't have a mentor growing up in, I say growing up, but growing in the news industry. And I really wish I had. I finally grabbed a mentor like right as I was leaving the news. And it's such a shame that people don't make time for that unless it's in the company structure. I've had a lot of admiration for companies that set up a mentorship program that you have to be involved in. I think that is key because finding external mentors is very, very hard. What I've learned from mentoring is, I was mentoring a lot of young women through this program called Flick. And they were freshmen, sophomores in universities, and they were, trying to kind of intern and figure out what their career path was. And so they would do some marketing work with me on projects, and I would mentor them at the same time. And what I realized is a lot of young people are very, very driven, but what they forget is that network is your most important thing as a leader, as someone, starting a business. And so if I could have harnessed my network when I was younger, I can't even imagine where I would have been. So the number one thing I've learned through mentoring them is your most important currency is your network, and how you treat your community is what will pay you back, 100 times over as you grow in your career, as you grow in your business, everything. So I learned that lesson late, I think. And so everybody that I mentor, I try and really instill that one quality, like no matter if you don't do anything else, if you don't take anything else away from this, learn how to build your network in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. And, as an introvert, it's kind of hard to do sometimes, but being intentional about it. And I know for me, it was going to small conferences and meetups. That was a really big thing. And I found when I was, first becoming a manager and, working in technology as a software developer, our company didn't pay for us to go to conferences and learn things, but I learned that if you can speak at a conference, they'll typically, give you a free ticket and free place to stay. And there's a lot of local tech conferences out there. And, so I would just apply to speak. And if I got selected, then that was a conference I was going to go to. And I made it a point while I was at the conference to only attend every other session, and the sessions in between, just walk the halls and try to meet somebody. And every day eat breakfast and lunch with somebody I didn't know. Just show up and try to talk to somebody. And, I was usually exhausted by the end of the day, so I'd go to bed early, but I would try to at least build one contact during breakfast and one contact during lunch the 3 days I was at the conference, and then shoot them a follow-up email. Hey, it was good to meet you at this thing, or a LinkedIn message, and just start building that community.
Yep, that's exactly what I've been doing over the last month, I feel like, because I've been at San Francisco Tech Week, I've been at FinTech Week in Boston, AI Week, all these different things. And what you realize is everybody wants to meet new people. And so, you don't have to be the wallflower. I started just walking up into, groups and saying, hey, I'm Tamara. What are you excited about here at this conference? And do exactly what you were saying, which is then you LinkedIn connect, you follow up the next day,
Yep.
do all that. I think it's important to remember to have a good CRM system. So I'm using ADIO right now, and I put my notes in there so that I can follow up, and it connects to my LinkedIn so that I've got, notes. Otherwise, at San Francisco Tech Week, I was probably connecting with, 50 people at each event. And I was like, what did we talk about? What was that? How am I following up with this person? What are they? So, having a good system in place, it's just going into your notes in your phone and at least taking a note on everyone. If LinkedIn ever, someone told me that LinkedIn used to do that, allow you to connect and have a personal note, and that they did away with it. Cause I was like, perfect.
Yeah.
That's all you need, so that you remember, okay, who is this person? And, what were we talking about?
Oh yeah. There's been so many times where I'm like, oh, I met you at Code Stock. I'm like, I never went to Code Stock. Like, oh crap. That I met you at a different conference. Yeah. So yeah, it can be kind of embarrassing if you don't have the good notes in there. So that's for sure. Tell me a little bit about What the Frac, and why you guys got into that. What is that exactly?
So What the Frac is a podcast as well. It's about growing your business from a fractional executive perspective. So, my co-host Nicole and I were both fractional executives, helping small businesses and startups launch and scale. And so, we kept hearing these same questions from founders, and we would be talking about it over coffee or over Zoom, and how is it that, we keep hitting the same situation with different startups. And so we decided maybe we can help them out. We'll do a podcast. We'll do these, troubleshooting episodes. We'll talk to leaders in the field. And so we started coming out with these weekly podcasts called troubleshooting episodes, where we would say, okay, someone was asking us about podcast advertising. So we kind of went through our framework of podcast advertising, and we had a bunch of fun different episodes like that. And then we started interviewing executive leaders, and that started to really take off and have a lot of traction. And so that's what we do now. We do troubleshooting episodes. We do interviews with executives, fractional executives, on how small businesses and startups can launch and scale.
Awesome. And what have you learned most from doing that?
Oh my gosh, that is a loaded question. And then
I honestly, if you would have asked me what I've learned from this podcast the most, I couldn't answer that question.
Yeah.
440 some odd guests in, I have no idea.
Yeah, every different episode has such great things. We just spoke to someone who does disaster mitigation. Mm-hmm. So for companies, basically when there's a catastrophe, she comes in and she cleans it up. And so we were talking about how do you set yourself up for success in the case of, a catastrophe or reputational risk, which was fascinating, right? And so I think there's so many small things that we forget to do because we're usually focused on marketing, sales. There's those are the hot topics because those obviously have to do with, revenue. But sometimes we forget some of these other small things that are really important and interesting. Mm-hmm. We talked to someone who does trademarks.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting things. So I wouldn't say there was one major thing I've learned, because I would say if there's one major thing I've learned, it's that everybody's only interested in figuring out how AI applies to their business, right? And that's from a consulting, perspective of how consultants are figuring out how to help businesses with AI, and from business perspective of how they're trying to incorporate AI. Like that is the question. So we can't seem to get away from that in every episode. But
yeah, it comes up in every podcast that I have too. There's always something, and most of the shows are about it. I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. Most of them, come in with the mindset that we're going to talk about AI here. But there's so many different things, and a lot of it is, it's honestly fear driven too. People are afraid. People are trying to make sure they're not left behind. They don't want this to be the next .com bubble, or whatever it is.
It's that meme that you see. It's like the executives, and they're like, "What do we want? AI. When do we want it? Now. Why do you want it? I don't know."
Because everybody else has it.
Everybody else has it. Like, cannot be left out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, if people have more questions, they want to pick up or listen to your show or learn more about Empower, how can they connect with you online and learn more?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best. I seem to be living there recently. So DM me on LinkedIn. You can find me. It's Tamara Laine. And otherwise, Instagram, I'm also there in the direct messages. So, and I should also say, my CTO would yell at me if I didn't say go to our website, empower.money, so mpwr.money, and you can sign up for our email list. You can be one of the first beta users of our financial budgeting platform that we've got for cash flow analysis. It's great. It's very intuitive, and you just talk to it. So if you want, go over there, sign up for updates, and hit me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And that URL again was Empower Money, MPWER?
MPWR.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. I drop all the vowels. MPWR.money.
.money. Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes too at equitable.com, so people can go there and click through and find you. And I'll also put a link to your podcast, What the Frac, if anybody's interested there. Hopefully they can go over and listen to an episode and learn some too. Tamara, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great chatting.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.